Alrighty, and we're live. We're just going to hang out for a couple minutes as folks trickle in. We have a lovely AMA, or I guess Ask Us Anything, because both Tim and I will be here to answer questions. I'm Jonah, our program director, as you may know from previous streams. And this over here, I think I'm pointing the right direction, is Tim, founder of Cascade Games. How you doing, Tim? Yeah, absolutely. So while we're just waiting for folks to start trickling in until I see the first couple of messages, we actually haven't gone to talk as much about Star Wars as either of us would like. We're usually too busy talking about work and like the judge program, the structure of that, rather than Star Wars. So what do you actually love about Star Wars? This is not a question I've asked you before, and it's a question that I want the answer for. And it also gives me a chance to see if people can hear you.
I grew up loving both Star Wars and Star Trek, right? And that's static. So the Star Trek I love because of its utopian vision of the future. And Star Wars, man, well, first of all, the visuals captured me as a kid, right? When I was sitting in a movie theater seeing Star Wars for the first time, I thought, fourth grade me thought that lightsabers and Darth Vader were the coolest things ever. I confess, I did not get as a kid why Stormtrooper armor was so pointless, right? Because and honestly, I still don't. Right? If a group of Neolithic Ewoks can take you out wearing that armor, you probably need to upgrade your armor. But I
mean,
don't know.
Okay, hold on. This is the nerd in me, and I want to answer that question.
Sure, go ahead.
And so, plasteel armor, which is what stormtroopers wear, is generally primarily designed to absorb energy weapons, and so it can dissipate the power from an energy blast, particularly glancing blows. But if you get enough like kinetic damage in there, it'll pierce that armor. That's at least the explanation that I go with.
Yeah, so a teddy bear throwing a bolo, and can totally strangle you, where this armor dissipates blaster shots, except it doesn't seem to do that either.
No, but that's so our heroes can win.
Right. I loved, the other thing, I loved I still do. I shouldn't put this in past tense. The philosophy behind Star Wars really spoke to me. The, I don't know, the Eastern influences, the Force is basically applied Buddhism with, and it's just such a cool I wanted to be a Jedi Knight. I still want to be a Jedi Knight. I mean, who doesn't?
People who don't know better.
Although actually, honestly, I'm going to say something and offend everybody here, but every year I go to San Diego Comic-Con, and every year I look at all these people cosplaying, and I just I get why you might want to cosplay Darth, and I get why you might want to I get wanting to cosplay a Sith. I do not understand why you want to cosplay random Imperial. They're the bad guys. Be the good guys. Especially when the good guys are Jedi and they're so freaking
Jedi
cool.
are so cool.
And as a practical matter, their costumes are easy to make robes, and they hide the big tummy that people like I have. So this seems like an obvious course.
I'm working on a set of Mandalorian armor, and that is hard because it has to be armor and it has to fit me. Robes, you just throw it's a little bit more than a bathrobe, but it's nice.
How much
and
harder?
Easy. But let's get started. Let's get the show on the road. First off, hi folks, thank you all for joining us. Tim and I
Jonah, I can't see how many are there. Is there a way for me to know?
That is a wonderful question. It looks like we have about 25 people in the chat right now.
Okay.
So, to start, I think a lot of you have seen me before. If you haven't, hi, I'm Jonah. I'm the program director for the Star Wars Judge program, Star Wars Unlimited Judge program. I'm in charge of making all the content, figuring out what the Judge program means, and getting that information out to all of you. Tim, What's your job title and job description? What are you doing here?
So I'm the founder of Cascade Games, and let's see, what do I do? I hired Jonah. That's something I did.
That was a
Uh,
very good decision, in my
I
opinion.
Yeah, both of us like that decision. So yeah, I hired Jonah and get him to do all the work. Uh, but in all seriousness, all the businessy kinds of stuff, um, all the businessy kinds of stuff, and there's a surprisingly large amount of that I'm in charge of. And then I chime in a lot about, I don't know, general organized play. Um, is this the right time to talk about my background?
I think so, yeah.
Maybe I should.
You've been
Okay,
doing this for a minute or two?
a minute or two. So I was really lucky that I was running a comic book store in Olympia when these guys came down to my store who are infrequent customers and were showing me this game they were playtesting that hadn't shipped yet called Magic the Gathering. And so I got to play. I didn't really get to play. I got to look and goob out on the cards before Magic first shipped, and then, and yes, this officially makes me old. And then I got, I, I eventually sold my store and got to go to work for Wizards of the Coast and be part of the team that helped to design the first organized play efforts for trading card games. And then from that point on, I'm not really a big corporation kind of guy or big company kind of guy. And so I left, and I fairly quickly started running events for them. And then one thing led to another. And I have run events for many, many publishers all over North America and a scattering of Europe, nothing in Asia though. And let's see, I don't know. And I have done consulting for or event management for almost every company that's of size. And then I was lucky enough to run the Magic Judge program for about 4 years, and now on to Star Wars.
Awesome. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and just get into our first few questions. We're pulling some questions from the Discord. If you have more questions, please don't put them in the Discord now because I'm not going to be able to check that during the stream. Just go ahead and drop them in chat, and I'll bring them up as you come up with those questions. So, just starting from the top, for the planetary qualifiers, what happens if a store or tournament organizer doesn't select judges from the list that Cascade gives them? How will it affect them in the long term?
Okay, so some of this is beyond my pay grade, but Cascade Games has been, so Asmodee has asked us to come up with an interim certification process since, ultimately we need certified judges working events, right? So we've come up with a screening process, and by we I mean Jonah did the hard work on this, and then over the next few days, Jonah and I will be going through all of the people who have applied for, let's call it interim certification. Is that fair? Interim
Yeah,
certification?
for the first wave of events.
For the interim for the first wave of events. So we're going to go over the 800-ish.
It's close to 800 now. Yeah, it's a lot of work that y'all have put on my shoulders.
Yes.
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to them.
Yes, a little bit of both, actually.
Yeah, a little bit of both.
So we'll go through it, mostly Jonah, score people's tests, and take a look at what backgrounds they have in order to make recommendations. And what we'll do is first we'll say, we'll sort this of, these are the folks who have the background and the skills as reflected by passing the test that they're qualified to be a head judge for the Wave 1 events. Okay. And then there'll be another list of people who, for whatever reason, don't seem to be, and this is an inexact science anyway, but people who are possibly ready to be floor judges or scorekeepers or whatever, but not head judge. And then there's going to be people who don't make it, right? So we'll have 3 buckets. we will communicate those three buckets of people. Actually, we'll communicate buckets 1 and 2, to the stores that have been selected to run these events. My understanding is that Asmodee has strongly worded this, that they need folks to be in that head judge bucket in order to head judge the event, because of course Asmodee cares deeply about the quality of these events, which makes sense. They're the launch events for a new game. The game's doing really well. Nobody wants a negative outcome, right? So my understanding is that stores are required to use someone from the head judge list, and it is recommended but not required to use folks from the floor judge list. So that's as much as I can tell you about it. I am, I want to be a no BS kind of person. So there's part of this question I'm not answering, which is, what are the consequences if a store doesn't follow this directive? And I don't actually know the answer to that. I know that's going to be Asmodee's decision, but I can't imagine stores aren't going to, right? I mean, if you've got an option between somebody who's been selected, screened, and we know they're super qualified, why wouldn't you use that person?
Also, if there's a judge or two that a store really wants to use, and that person isn't somebody that we recommend, one, that store should tell that person to take the evaluation tonight, because the evaluation is closing in a little over 24 hours. And two, they can still staff that person as a floor judge so that they have somebody that they've worked with before present at the event, working with the person that we recommended, and you can get the best of both worlds in that way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's no reason, if a store wants a particular person, they also could just shoot me an email, and then I'll have that person go through the screening process too. And if somebody, actually that's enough to go into hypotheticals, but we're not on some kind of crazy power trip. You've got to be on the list. We're on team. We need to have the most qualified people running the events so that the judges and the stores can deliver the best organized play experience they can.
Yeah. I'm going to pull a question from the chat right now. Kel Rilo asks, there are no planetary qualifiers in my area. Should I just wait for the apprentice test? Go ahead and take the Season 0 evaluation just for fun if it's something that you're interested in. It won't have any practical standing on, or any practical effect on your standing as a certified judge. This test isn't to certify anybody as a judge, it's just for staffing, but it's a good way to get some experience with test questions. I'm not going to copy and paste any over directly to the apprentice test, at least for now, but it shows you the format. It's good practice.
And yeah, it's good practice, and the feedback, if you take that test and you get a perfect score, that's really like the measurement of where you are versus where you think you might be. That feedback is super, super valuable.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to jump down our list of questions from the Discord a little bit to one that's associated, which is, who reviews applications and chooses which stores in which cities get planetary qualifiers, sector qualifiers, regional qualifiers, galactic championship, that sort of thing?
Sure. And the answer to that is this one that is squarely on the Asmodee side. I believe there's a committee working on it, and I believe it reflects, I believe that sales and marketing and blah. I don't know exactly is really the truth of it. It's a group, and I know they're working hard, and I also know inevitably that whenever there's a situation like this, there's always going to be arguments about should this store have been selected over that store or whatever. But I'm trying to stay focused on the overall community and say I'm just delighted that the events are starting.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we don't have any impact on the tournament organizers. We will give feedback probably as we start to go to events ourselves, and just be like, hey, this tournament did great. We think you should really work with this TO more. But our voice carries only a little bit more weight than you as a player reaching out to FFG and being like, hey, this store was great. I want to see more events at this store.
It's fair.
Um, Alrighty. Uh, Going back to the questions. Will the current Cascade Games website eventually have a place for head judges and tournament organizers to request applications for floor judges?
Let's just start out with it. I hope it is obvious to everybody that the current website is nowhere near in a finished state, right? We're just getting started with this. For those of you who might be familiar with what we did for Judge Academy, obviously that site was much more mature, but it had some stability issues, and we decided that it would be better to start over and try and make sure the code was more stable. And so that's why it's in the state it's in. And the direct answer to your question is yes, I think what you're talking about is some kind of tool so that a person who is running events can advertise their event and say, I want to find people, to help out with this event. So are we going to have a matching service? Yes. And then the second question that comes up, at least I've gotten off to the side, is, are you guys going to charge for this? And the answer is no. Sometimes people, sometimes people, when they see a matching service, start thinking an Uber model. And no, we are not going to become an employer. We're not going to become a staffing agency, and we are not going to try and charge tournament organizers or judges for the matchmaking function.
Awesome. I'm just going to dive back into the chat questions real quick, pull a couple out. Omega 2K3 asks, is there an attendance requirement for judging events to maintain certification once obtained? So the short answer for this is we haven't figured out exactly what maintenance is going to look like long term. Part of it is we don't have level 1 certification published yet, and so the maintenance for it is over a year away. As we get closer to that, we'll talk about it. It's very likely that judging an event or two per year will be a requirement to maintain the level 1 certification, because it shows that, you're still doing this thing. However, it's very possible that there will be other routes where you can take maintenance exams that show that you have kept up with the rules changes that have occurred over the year without having to go to events. Particularly at higher levels, there's more specific events that you need to attend, and we don't want to lock people out if they still have the skills required. Humble Greek is asking in the chat, is there going to be a badge system? Right now, we're going to keep it simple with levels. Levels are very easily communicated to tournament organizers, to other judges, to the publishers. It's very clear to people who aren't deeply invested in the system what those levels mean. Badges are a great tool for invested communities. Once things are up and running, we might have something, but it'll be mostly for you to communicate with other judges and not be as public facing and not be a part of most application processes.
And, the other part of this is a new game, and we intend to follow the game to a large degree. So there's some steering we're doing with steering the judge program, but, there's more than one way to structure organized play. There's more than one way to structure a judge program, and we're going to try and respond to the needs of the community. And so if tournament organizers are all telling us that they have a particular area of need, maybe we'll create a badge system around that. Maybe judges feel they have a need in some way. Like, if you have strong feelings about this one way or another, just tell Jonah.
Yeah. This program is so young. I mean, the first certification isn't even out yet. The second one's going to be in a little while, and so we're not locked in for anything. And even once we do have certifications out, our goal is to remain flexible and adaptable to what the program needs.
Exactly.
Magic Player for Life asks, are you allowed to judge a planetary qualifier for a different region if you're not allowed at the store that has a qualifier near you, due to the fact that the owner of the shop has a qualifier near you and the two of you had a disagreement? Yeah, there's no geographic requirement on running events. You can judge events anywhere in the world. I know that I travel quite frequently and quite far distances to judge all sorts of events. I've flown across the continent a couple of times in the past few months to handle events, not necessarily just for Star Wars Unlimited, but you can absolutely travel. This one's going to go off topic. You ready for an off topic question, Tim?
I am ready.
All right. Humble Greek asks, "What is your favorite animal?"
Oh wow.
Yeah, you were not prepared for that in the slightest.
I okay. So when I was a kid, by far my favorite animal was the elephant. And I'm old enough that there were still traveling circuses, which is just not a thing anymore. Probably shouldn't be a thing. But I have two brothers, each one's just a little bit older than me, and so my parents were very, very, like, John's a year older and then Joe's 1 year older than that. My parents were very, very tired, and we were at the circus one day, and I was probably 4, maybe, and my parents turned the other way, and I hopped out of my seat and just kind of on my own walked down the steps, hopped into the ring, and tried to go pet the elephants. Because doesn't everybody want an elephant friend? I want an elephant friend.
Incredible.
I survived this experience too. But anyway.
Alrighty.
So
yeah.
Now I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have an answer.
Birds of prey. Birds of prey right now. Although there's these gorgeous egrets that are right next to my office. So egrets maybe. Osprey.
I get bonus points if I say my roommate's cat, so I'm going to name Theo. He's great. He complains all the time that he's being starved, even as I am actively feeding him. But he's still...
That's awesome, Jonah.
Yeah. All right. CM5871 in the chat. I know it's been touched on before, but what about judge shirts and other official clothing? Will they be the same as the Gen Con shirt that was received, or will new shirts be made?
Complicated issue. Okay. Let's start out with, I think, and feel free to chime in the chat, and if I'm wrong about this, well, you can even tell me if I'm right. I think a judge shirt for Star Wars Unlimited has to have the word Star Wars on it. Okay. If we put Star Wars on anything, anyhow, anywhere, no qualifications, it has to be approved by Disney/Lucas licensing. Okay. In order, right now, the Gen Con shirt has been approved, and so we believe that we're going to be able to have these produced. And so we believe we're going to be able to have these produced, and at least in the United States, and that means there will be an opportunity to buy them through us. Okay. What about Europe? What about Latin America? What about Asia? I don't know yet. I think what will happen is that we'll be able to roll out a program. We're working on something that hopefully it's a matter of a couple weeks until we have a way for you to buy shirts if you don't have them. And yes, they'll still be the same design, but I understand at Gen Con there were multiple colors of shirts, and I think we're working on one color right now. So we're gonna have what this is gonna look like is there will be an answer for North America, and that answer for licensing reasons will happen faster than in other regions, in other geo regions, because it's super complicated with both the licensing part and, like, say for instance Brazil. I've got a fair amount of experience making things in the United States and then trying to ship it to Brazil, and Brazilian law just doesn't accommodate. It's just the tariffs are too high for us to to buy a shirt here, make sure it's licensed, make sure it complies. Disney has and should have, I like it, but they have very strict requirements about safety and the ethical sourcing and all that cool stuff, which I think is good. However, it means that I can't just I can't just call up a t-shirt shop in Brazil and have them knock out 100 shirts, right? And so we're going to have to first get an answer for the US, and then we're going to have an answer of who's going to sell these shirts outside of the US, probably by geo region, and then we're going to have to source them in that geo region, and so it's going to take a while.
Yeah. So the
Jonah,
short
was that
version,
clear? There was a lot of words there.
Yeah, the short version is, for this first initial wave of qualifiers and events, at least the United States is going to have shirts that are similar to or the same as the ones available at Gen Con. Longer term, we hope to get a unified design that maybe is a little bit different and is available globally.
And then the other part that I can tell you about this, we don't have details yet, but anytime you've got to go through layers of licensing, price and fulfilling things one at a time, the cost is going to be higher than I want. And so we're working on hopefully clever ways to add a bunch of value to help to make this better. So I think next week's probably too soon to have it worked out completely, but I'm hoping 2 weeks from now we can have an answer for you.
Awesome. Jumping to just quickly answer Magic Player for Life, your secondary question. To judge one of the first wave of planetary qualifiers, the ones in October, you're going to want to fill out the Season 0 application on nexus.cascadegames/Season 0. Eduism asks, will you or a delegation of the judge program be at Spiel in Essen in October?
I am trying. So I've never been to Essen before.
I really wish I could go. I'm not available that weekend. This is not a pitch for you to buy me a plane ticket to Germany.
Okay, so unfortunately, we're on a short timeline. I just looked at flights yesterday, in fact, and it was more than $1,500.
Yeah,
and so I want to go and I want to have a meetup. Okay, so this is my goal would be I want to go, I want to have a meetup, I want to get feedback from people in Europe, and I want to show up like Santa Claus and give you some goodies too. I don't know if the first event will be, so the two events that I've got targeted in Europe right now are Essen Spiel and then UK Games Expo. If there are other events that you think we should be at, I would very much like, just shoot me an email at Tim@Cascade or put it in the chat or just tell Jonah. That always. But let us know. So right now, I want to be as concrete as I can. I want to do it. I'm going to go 75% likely that we will.
Awesome. Gentle Giant 303 just wants to compliment the art that you have behind you. Says it's great artwork.
Do you? Is it the hand drawn? So the Sharpie playmat of Morpheus, or is the one that you like Frank Miller's Ronin?
We'll see if Gentle Giant responds. And go through a couple questions as that, because there have been a lot of questions. So a couple of folks have been talking about insignia for uniforms. One person's mentioning Imperial rank insignia. Somebody else is red lightsaber pens for judging purposes, so we can write in red. I want to...
That's awesome.
Small kibosh on Imperial rank insignia. One, you'd have to go through a lot of licensing. Two, this is something that Tim was talking about at the top of the show when we were just talking about what we like about Star Wars. But the Imperials are authoritarian law enforcers who are not necessarily good people. as
They're
a like,
fascists. They
yeah,
fascists
okay, yeah, they're authoritarian fascists, and I don't want
who
judges
blow
to
up
be
planets.
who don't, and I don't want judges to be associated with authoritarian fascists. I want judges to be associated with people who are a little bit more kind and nurturing, and who you're excited to have come over and handle a rules or policy infraction at your table, rather than living in fear.
Having said that, we understand
Oh yeah,
that that this is in fact not a real story, and yeah, so we're not telling you don't like what you like,
yeah,
but
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 for the official like uniform, we're probably not going to go Imperial. Rebels a little bit more likely, but those uniforms don't look as good. I was thinking I've pitched X-wing pilot orange shirts because they're super visible, but some people don't like looking like a highlighter. Uh,
so let me give a little bit of context. We Anything that we do, like I said before, that uses the word Star Wars, okay, has to go through licensing approval. And for those of you who have not done this before, think a glacier, because it's going to move at a glacial pace, and so whatever, I imagine that whatever uniforms the uniforms that were used at Gen Con that have been approved, those are going to be in effect for probably a year or so until we come up until so it's right now is a great time to give Jonah suggestions about what you want to see, because so what this process will look like is you tell Jonah what you want. Jonah will think about it and then tell you you should look like a rebel pilot because that's what he wants to look like.
I
But no,
don't.
but Jonah will come up with something, and then what will happen is we'll have to go to potential shirt manufacturers who are approved shirt manufacturers, determine what they can do, and then once we know what they can do, then we'll have to get it approved by Fantasy Flight / Asmodee, and then after that they'll have to get it approved by Disney. And so this is a year from now.
Yeah.
So right now, cool bowling shirt from Gen Con is what
Yep.
we're going to start with.
Raster MTG, you ask if you happen to have the Gen Con shirts and are selected to judge a planetary qualifier, can you wear them at the events? Absolutely 100%. And we're going to try and make the Gen Con shirts available to other folks who are selected to run those events, or maybe even available publicly so that if you're running stuff at your local store, you'll be able to pick one up.
Let me I actually need to throw in
Yeah.
a piece of nuance. Okay. I am in charge of this judge program ultimately. I am not your boss. Okay, when you judge an event, your boss is the tournament organizer, the store owner, the person who is signing your check, and they better sign you a check. So the thing is, we're going to have created a uniform. Asmodee will make whatever rules they make about dictating a uniform, but ultimately the person who you need to ask, can I wear something, is you need to ask your tournament organizer. Having said that, the only official Star Wars Unlimited judge shirt right now is that Gen Con shirt. So hopefully the answer is the Gen Con shirt, but go talk to your TO.
Yeah. Gentle Giant asks, so no head judge shirt different from a floor judge? That's not something that we have now. It's something that would need to get approved and go through
and
licensing.
I want that really, really badly. And you're going to hear over this AMA or Ask Us Anything or whatever, as you're going to hear a whole bunch of, I very much want this, but I don't have it yet. But to me, having a slightly different color seems like a no-brainer, and we'll see what happens.
Yep. Let's see. Nilrem, if you took the Season 0 evaluation, the results or an explanation of all the questions is going to be coming up on Thursday after the evaluation is closed. Shirts, I believe it's going to be available to anybody who has an account.
Jonah, how you said that wasn't clear.
Oh, yeah.
You were answering their question about results, right?
Yes.
Why don't you do it again?
Yeah, for sure. So results will be available. You're not going to get direct results. I don't have the bandwidth to grade 800 individual tests and provide individual feedback.
Lazy.
Anyways, I am going to put together an article explaining all of the questions, why we asked them, what we were looking for, and what the answer we were looking for was. And that's going to come out as soon as I can get it out. I have to make sure that these events are staffed, and that's a slightly higher priority. Getting the apprentice level exam ready for Friday is also a higher priority. I'm targeting Thursday for this evaluation review, but it might be a little bit longer. Gentle Giant says that they like the Ronin more, but both pieces of art are great.
Okay, cool, cool.
Jumping through so many comments. As a person willing to travel anywhere to judge, how do we get in touch with TOs to let them know, and will they pay travel expenses? This one I'll handle. Previously, we mentioned that we are working on developing for the website a place where tournament organizers can post events where judges can apply for events, some sort of matchmaking service. So that will eventually be a service that we offer. A lot of local groups have them. We also hope that tournament organizers start to use the Judge Discord as a place to advertise their events. As for them paying travel expenses, that is on a tournament organizer basis. Some tournament organizers do, others do not.
And fundamentally, right, how the relationship works is your local tournament organizer, whoever, or for a national level, right? If whoever, and I say this as somebody who's been a tournament organizer a lot, it is employment related questions. What do I get paid? How is there a travel stipend? What about a hotel room? Blah blah blah. All of those kinds of questions are not just ultimate. Those are squarely on the tournament organizer, and so please, I hope you feel comfortable talking to your TO. And as just a piece of advice, never work an event until you've had this conversation first. Make sure you know, because there's been untold amounts of misery created in the past where one person says, I'll work for whatever's fair, right? Please don't work for whatever's fair. Nobody knows what fair means. Make sure before you work an event that you have a conversation, particularly in writing, with the tournament organizer who says, I will pay you this number of dollars per hour in order to do this thing. And because that's how we do it, right? We make sure that everybody agrees before the work is done. That way there's no hurt feelings and there's no disputes.
Yep. Director Griffin asks, can we speak a bit on the difference between TOs and Cashbox? Director Griffin, this is coming from a conversation that you and I had at SDCC about language that various communities use. For some, tournament organizer means the person who is paying for the venue, paying for staff, determining what the event schedule is. That is generally how Tim and I are going to be using the term TO or tournament organizer. Some other communities use the term tournament organizer in a way that we would use event manager or judge manager. This is somebody who is responsible for judges at the event and is like the final touchstone for any major policy disputes before going up to the person who is running the whole shebang. That's something that we'll clarify in a glossary at some point in the future.
But the key part is, at least from how I'm using the term, is that anytime you work for anyone, there is someone who is ultimately your employer. Okay? I call that thing a tournament organizer. You can call him or her, they, whatever. You can call them boss. You can call them the store owner. You can use whatever terminology you choose. But what's important is when you work an event, you've got to have an agreement with that person in advance in order to decide how much you're paid. And frankly, you should always be paid. Let's we've got a new judge program.
Yes.
Let's make sure that judges just know to value their time, and ultimately you should be paid for any work you do. Full stop.
Yep. You're providing value to somebody who's making a profit. You are entitled to a share of that.
Period.
Yep.
It doesn't matter who it is. There is no such thing as volunteering for a for-profit entity. That doesn't exist, at least not in the United States. I know we've got an international audience, but in most places that's true as well. And let's not work for free, folks.
Yep. CM5871 asks, what do we say qualifies as an event? Do weeklies count pre-release and up showdowns? What if you're playing it, say, in a pre-release? So the way I'm going to be defining event for an event that you have worked, it is your primary responsibility there is answering questions and making sure that the event functions. So that means potentially running scorekeeping software if you're the only judge there. If you are putting together the pairings and answering the questions is your primary responsibility, that counts as an event for requirements. An event as in for compensation, I think that this is, if the TO asks you to do something, if the tournament organizer or store asks you to do work, they've asked you to do work. Now, the amount of compensation is flexible. This is something that you need to negotiate with them. If you're answering like a question over the course of a 4-hour period, you don't need to get paid minimum wage. Like, you don't need to get paid a salaried wage for that, right? But you should be compensated for your time, efforts, and skill.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And we are not the arbitrators of this, right? The arbitrators of this are ultimately this is governed by law everywhere in the United States, Canada, Europe, and most other countries. So we should just pass on this and we should pass on this topic and move on to the next stuff. But it's a new game. It's a new chance. Let's make sure people get paid.
Yes. Alrighty. Going back to the list of questions people submitted beforehand and dipping out of chat for a second, because I think we've caught up. How much direct influence does Fantasy Flight Games have in the Judge Cert and Judge Advancement program? Is FFG required to approve tests, advancement plans, levels, requirements, etc.?
Let me take a shot at this, and then since you're doing the actual day-to-day stuff, you can nuance it too. But this is a collaboration. You should think of it as Cascade. And when I say Cascade, I mean mostly Jonah, right? I'm neither qualified nor particularly interested in coming up with individual judge questions, right? So most of this is Jonah. And then, so Jonah usually originates an idea. He and I talk about it. Then we have a conversation with Asmodee Fantasy Flight, whichever way you want to label that. We talk with the game publisher, and then we get some amount of feedback, and then Jonah takes that feedback, revises the plan, and then we move forward. I don't know. Did that answer what they wanted?
Yeah, I think more or less. I mean, to add a little bit to it, they did give us the broad scope of what they were looking for. They're like, this is what we want to have certified judges for. These are the events that we want to have judges at. So please make judge certification that will meet these requirements. And then kind of let us loose. I do submit most of my documentation to FFG, but it is not an approval process. It's a review process. So they can be like, hey, this doesn't match something that we have coming up, or this doesn't match some, I share stuff with folks from the rules team, with Ryan, the rules admiral, and every once in a while he's like, okay, so technically what you've said is incorrect. However, to everybody who speaks the language that you're writing in, they'll know what you mean. I would just move this comma 2 words over. So we do submit a bunch of stuff to them, but they don't have direct influence. Like, this is all our, like, we are making the decisions, and then they're saying, oh yeah, this is great. Like, so far, all we've gotten is, like, a little bit of grammatical errors, or just like, hey, you said that the season 0 ends in August 2025. It actually ends in July 2025. So nothing major, just clarifications and making sure we're on the same page with regard to communication.
Well, and another piece of it is, you probably aren't going to say this directly, but let me. Jonah's really good. Jonah's really good, and so, and well, Jonah's really good, and they're really, really busy, right? They're super, super busy, and so nobody's going to micromanage Jonah because nobody has the time for it. And so mostly it's Jonah doing Jonah and the rest of us going, wow, thank you so much. Right? I mean,
I'll take that. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Omega 2K3, speaking of communication with FFG, is feedback provided for rules clarification and documentation improvement based on the community's feedback to Cascade Games? And if so, what's the turnaround for that kind of thing look like?
Let me take a first shot at this, and then you can. Okay. So the answer is absolutely. Part of what we are specifically contracted to do is gather feedback from the judge community. From the larger player community, yeah, it's fine, but hopefully what's happening is players are talking to judges and you're on the ground seeing what's happening. You pass it up to us. Jonah compiles a list, and I believe you're meeting with them every 2 weeks, but maybe it's once a month. I don't know.
We haven't set up a schedule yet, but things are still in the early days. I'm just creating this hose of content, and then I'm like, oh, right, I have a bunch of other stuff to do.
And then, and the initial response to Jonah's feedback has been very, very positive. Okay. They are, I can tell you, absolutely, they are listening, they are learning, they are growing, and they are making changes. Okay. The other thing you've got to remember is Star Wars Unlimited is a rocket, right? It is shooting off into space, and not the easy kinds of liftoff we have, in Star Wars. This is a big deal, and there's a lot of moving parts, and we've got to have a good deal of, when a game's brand new, you got to have a lot of tolerance for it's going to take the answer that I personally find unsatisfying, but it is the real answer. It's going to take some time. And so it would be cool if I could tell you every 2 weeks Jonah's meeting, and then within 2 weeks every change will be made. That's not realistic, and I can't tell you what is.
I have a little bit more insight on that.
Sure,
which is, I'm going to try and meet with them regularly and get to the point. I am not a representative FFG, so I can communicate in slightly different ways than they can. For their official updates, those have to go through several layers of approvals, including licensing, and so it needs to go all the way up the chain and then all the way back down the chain. And so I believe their current plan is have these updates with set releases, which is going to be relatively infrequent. Part of what we're providing is a way to communicate to judges what the direction things are going in, and so we'll be able to communicate, hey, this is the direction we're talking about philosophically with policy or rules. Here's a clarification, or yeah, we missed a period there, and that changes the card entirely. There's a period there. Please rule like it has a period there. It won't be in the rules document for a while because it needs to go through various approval processes, but we can let folks know what that is.
Okay, what do you got next?
Let's see what is next. 64 to 128 player planetary qualifiers are relatively small events. Is it possible to lobby FFG sooner than a year from now to add more planetary qualifiers? A lot of players are frustrated that they didn't get into the only one in driving distance.
So we are not in a position to make statements around what the plans are, right, for organized play. But what I can tell you is the program's not in its finished state, right? That's why it's being referred to as season 0, not season 1. And it is crystal clear to anyone with eyes to see that there is a awful lot of demand, and the number of events is not adequate to support everything over the long term. Okay, was that a good enough way to not say anything that
Yeah,
I wasn't supposed
yeah,
to say?
I think we're good.
Right. I think we're good too.
Um, Coming from the chat, Maurice Neeson, regarding tournament organizers, how to best advise or steer stores that do not wish to follow the FFG rules for prize support. Example, a store holds weekly play events but doesn't hand out weekly play kit boosters if people do not pay for them, while the players that do. So if you believe a store isn't following the FFG rules, that's not something that we have a direct hand in. Talk to the store, and if it continues to be a problem, reach out to FFG customer service. That's
Well,
but
let me give you let me give you a little bit more.
yeah,
First, let's decide whether or not it's worthy of escalating an issue. Okay? So so there will be a million stores doing things a million different ways. It's inevitable, right? Because comic game store owners are, as a twice former comic book store owner, I can tell you, comic game store people do it their own way and don't follow rules particularly well. And so let's first start out and ask, is this a problem? Is it better how they're doing it? Or is it something that just doesn't matter? Okay. If it doesn't matter, or if if they found a better way, well, if it's better, give that feedback to us, and we'll try and compile it and suggest improvements to the OP program. Okay, then if it's a problem, then ask yourself, how much of a problem is it, and do you personally really care? Okay, if it's something you really care about and it really is a serious problem, then communicate it via email. I don't know which email address. Do you know, Jonah?
I don't know the customer service email off the top of my head.
Well, during our next AMA, or Jonah will find a way to share this with the Discord at some point. But ultimately, what you're going to do is the answer is going to be communicate that to Fantasy Flight, and then it gets really complicated because there's a complicated relationship between the store, who's ultimately responsible for running an event, and the publisher, and what, different legal systems, different countries, different amounts of authority, and it's a whole thing. So just know that it's complicated.
Yeah. Bingo Bango Live asks, how many judges can we expect planetary qualifiers to staff? This is going to be partially based on the tournament organizers themselves making the staffing decisions, but the recommendation from FFG, I'm not sure if it's a hard requirement, but I believe their target is absolutely a head judge and a judge for every 20 players. So depending on the size of the event, you're looking at between 3 and 6 judges.
Yeah, actually, I don't have anything to add other than that recommendation, by the way, is based on the newness of the game, and the newness of the player base. Newness is the wrong word, but it's an early game, right? I believe that as time goes on, I first of all, if the TO has staffed it to a different ratio, don't freak out. It may be that due to the level of qualification of the judges, to the level of overall experience in the community. I mean, the TO is going to make adjustments to that as they see fit. And over time, the ratio is going to evolve somewhere to 1 to 30, maybe 1 to 35 judges is my prediction.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. I don't know. Jonah, what would you do if it was your event? 1 to 30?
I like to have 1 to 30 as a minimum, maybe a couple extra bodies to cover breaks. And if we're in a store, the environment changes a little bit because maybe a store employee is able to help with some logistical procedures and that sort of thing. So it really depends on the experience of the judges, the experience, as you were saying, the experience of the judges, experience of the players. The venue has an impact. If Like the store is like, yeah, we have space for 30 players in this room, 30 players in that room, 30 players in that room, and 30 players in that room. If you're split across 4 rooms or 2 floors, like, we need more
I
bodies.
I saw an event where it was this room, that room, across the street, and across the street into another building on the second floor. Obviously, well, which I hate that experience, but in addition, that's, that requires crazy numbers of judges, right?
Yep.
And pairing is so awful under
Yeah.
that circumstance.
So roughly 1 to 20 for the first wave of events is what FFG is looking for. That's the ideal number. That's an extraordinary ratio. I'd be delighted to have that ratio at events.
But but let's not count on it
Yeah.
too much, right?
Does Cascade Games, moving on, because we're running, I mean, my brain had this as an hour. Do you have more time after this?
I'm good.
All right, fantastic. Does Cascade Games have any control over hosting generic open events similar to other major tournament organizers, or is it solely responsible for judge certification?
So Cascade Games is not currently running. So historically, this company has been an event organizer, right? And then over the last, I don't know, I've done a lot of consulting and a lot of event organizing. Right now, what I am not doing very much event organizing. In part, had some health problems, don't want to travel a lot, blah blah blah, and so I'm not running a lot of events. So I don't know. I don't know if that may change at some point in the future. But for today, no. Cascade Games is like we're gonna do. We'll do TwitchCon, San Diego Con because I love it. I don't know what else we'll do. We'll see. And speaking of which, I think we'll carve out time at TwitchCon for those of you who can get in person, and we'll do a meetup at TwitchCon. And I'm trying to get a meetup scheduled. Probably it will be announced tomorrow when I'm firm on the location. But it looks like I'll be able to head up to PAX West, and we'll do a meetup for judges.
Awesome. Alrighty. Will there be judge promos different from those that have been provided for Shadows of the Galaxy and Spark of Rebellion going forward?
Ask me in 2 weeks. Maybe a month. But let's just say I love shiny cards, right? I have shiny cards right now, right? I love some shiny cards. I would like to give you some shiny cards, and there's a pretty good chance that if you folks come see me at PAX West, I'll have something fun to share with you. But I do not have. I remember how we were talking. I was talking before about approvals and things moving slower than I want. It just takes time to create cards. You've got to print them, got to get them approved. You need to have art, blah blah blah. And so, I very much want to do some cool stuff, and hang out. We'll let you know soon.
Yeah. This is. I want to ask you a
Fair?
follow-up question. This isn't going too far, I hope, but do you really, really love good art, Tim?
I am a huge art nerd. I just am. And you know what? With I'm just gonna geek out for 30 seconds.
Yeah, take your
okay?
time, Tim.
So I'm in my office, right? And I don't know if you can see this. Jonah, can we see what I'm
Yeah, we got that.
So, okay. And over here, you can see the original art pieces on my wall, right? I love art. I love fantasy art, and the idea that I might be able to be involved in a project where someday I get to work with artists and that I get to work with artists and have them do original art for promo cards would make me one of the happier people on this planet. So I'm not announcing anything, but I am telling you that's what would make me happy.
We have some dreams.
We have dreams. Yes, yes. I, I was watching Tangled with my daughter, who's 11, a little bit ago, and I've got a dream. Yes, I have dreams. With any luck at all, at some point that dream will turn into a reality. Stay tuned. And then, obviously, then the next problem, if assuming we have something really fun to share, then comes all of the logistics of how do we share it and blah blah blah. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. A question from Kel Rilo in the chat is: are these cards for leveling up in the program?
I think, well, first of all, these cards don't exist.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. We haven't said anything exists. We've just said I love art.
And we have dreams.
And we have dreams. How a dream would be used is way premature. I do think it's worth recognizing. So when I think about how one could do this, right? The tension between. So actually, Jonah, how many subscribers do we have right now in the Discord?
I think just over 1,900 people in the Discord after a week and a half of existing.
After a week and a half, let's just round it up to 2,000 people. It is super easy to imagine that since there's no paywall attached to this program, that this could, which by the way, we don't have any intention of doing. So we could end up with 10,000 people becoming certified just because a lot of people will want to be certified just to have that experience and because it will help make you a better player, right? So we're going to have an awful lot of people. How do we get, let's assume someday there's something shiny in my hands that I can share. How do I get that from my hands to your hands? And how do I do that in a simple enough way that I don't go absolutely crazy? Those are complicated questions. And let's just say, from my prior experience, let's say what you're trying to do is mail cards from where I'm at in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, all over the country, maybe all over the world. Well, if it costs $15, $20 for something to go from Portland to Portugal, which it did, if we've got 20,000 people, then we're talking about an awful lot of money for shipping. And so I don't think that's what happens. I don't know exactly what we're going to do yet. I do think it's worth finding a way to recognize people who are more dedicated than people who are not.
Showing appreciation for particular skills and like advancement, recognizing achievement, that would be great.
That would be great. And if you have a cool way of doing that doesn't cost $100,000 a year for me to send out shiny cards, assuming shiny cards ever exist, which I have not said they do, not saying, but if, who knows? Maybe it's a statue, right? Whatever the theoretical thing is, right? Maybe it's an action figure. By the way, my daughter yesterday asked me what the difference between an action figure and a doll was. And trying to explain that is complicated. But anyway, so if I've got cool stuff and I want to get it to you, the easiest way for me to do it is for me to schedule meetups and then for me or Jonah or Chris or whoever to bebop to whatever city that is and give them to people who show up. I understand that's not perfect. The most thorough way is to mail things, but
the logistics on that are insane.
And for mentioning Portugal, because it was scarred into my mind from a previous judge program, We sent everything. We sent everything from it was. We had a distribution point in Europe. We mailed everything to that was supposed to go out, and somehow nothing arrived in Portugal. And a month and a half went past, and everybody felt angry with me for not doing it. And I received lots of colorful emails about it. And so then I reshipped everything to Portugal from the United States to Portugal, cost a fortune. And it turned out that the day after I shipped them, everything that had been delayed in Portugal's mail just arrived. So everybody got double shipped, right? I can't, not to mention the problems with people who are, say, in conflict zones like Russia. And, it's really easy to be sitting in the US and say, how hard is it to ship things out, right? And then when you try and apply this on a global level, it gets, what do you do if there's judges in Ukraine? What do you do if there are judges in Russia? What do you do if you're in a country that doesn't have reliable mail? These are all problems, and I don't have great answers for any of them.
Yeah. Moving
So,
on.
moving on.
What is the plan for when level 3 or higher judges can be logically attained? The competitive program as a whole seems to be moving very slowly for such a popular game.
Well, I agree the game's super popular.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is slow. I mean, if you go back in time and think about how long, and actually, honestly, I don't even remember the answer to this question, although I was there. But how long did it take for level 3s for Magic or Pokemon or whatever, right? It takes some
Levels
time.
didn't exist in Magic judging for a while, and the way they started it was like, if you got 100, congratulations, you're level 3. If you got a 60, congratulations, you're level 1.
Yeah, you know what? I don't even remember that stuff. So it's been a long time. I think things are moving at an acceptable, but I would prefer faster pace. I mean, part of it is we watch Jonah turn red as I say this, but we could have a level 3 test approved in a matter of a few weeks. But no, I could just be like, Jonah,
Okay.
work harder. But the thing is, what we're trying to do is start from the ground up and create classes and training material and then have tests. Yeah. And so I know some of you Jonah could create a level 3 test tomorrow. You'd pass it and that would be great. But that doesn't meet the programmatic goal. And so what we're trying to do is build step by step by step. And that's going to take a while. And there's no way we're having an L3 test in less than 6 months. Watch Jonah turn red. I mean, Jonah's got to.
Yeah, I can work with. You know what? If I overachieve over that, that's fine. That's fine. I don't need to give myself a 2-month deadline. That's not happening.
Right, but how about this? My priorities are, number one, a pre-level 1, the apprentice program.
Yep.
Level 1, and then I think level 2 first, and all of which are in English, and then start translating material into other languages.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, maybe we do some of that translation process before we get to 2. I think we probably get the training material and get to 2 and then start translating. But it's more important to me to get this right now. Have we talked about languages yet, Jonah? Have you announced any?
So we haven't talked about them a lot. Something that I have implemented is on the lesson pages themselves. I just put in a Google Translate widget. It's not the best translation, and particularly for technically precise language, oh boy, is it going to get some words wrong. But the gist is there, and that is something that we can do immediately. Okay, Gentle Giant, no, I did not say L3 test ready tomorrow. I did not. I'm watching chat,
I think
and I did not.
Wait, no. Isn't Gentle Giant the one who complimented my art?
Yes.
Then they get whatever they want.
Oh boy, Tim, this is not a way to run a judge program.
No. So we will get the priority right now is apprentice 1, 2, and then getting this getting materials translated into as many languages as we can realistically support. We're a super small team that's going to come up soon, but we're a small team, and so it's that part's going to take some time, and then comes L3. So that's yeah, and then and I don't know once it comes time for L3, because presumably we'll have materials in multiple languages, if we just do 3 in English, and then you know we'll see what happens there as well. So there's a good deal of discussions that need to be made.
Yeah.
Decisions, not discussions need to be made. Decisions need to be
Yeah.
made.
Where my answer for this is hopefully by the summer at the latest. So summer 2025 is when I'm targeting L3 training complete. One of the things that I feel is very important here is a lot of folks are coming from other properties within Star Wars or just being Star Wars fans and don't have a huge amount of TCG experience. And that's awesome. That's really exciting. Something that we really want to promote is folks not just coming in and being like, oh, I'm a judge for this other game, I might as well judge this, pays the bills. One, it doesn't, and two, we want people who are really excited about judging and judging Star Wars Unlimited in particular. But part of what we need to do is get experience and logistical training into people. That's a lot harder to do over online lessons and takes time at events to get that experience. Even if you have the comprehensive rules memorized today, if you've never answered a judge call before, you're not going to be an ideal judge. That's a reality. And so it's going to take a little bit of time to get L3 ready, but part of that is one of the requirements for L3 is spending so much time at level 2 getting experience. Like, we do have time-based gates. And so this slower rollout means that folks will have had the opportunity to get real practical experience and will be able to understand the game, how to answer calls, what sort of problems come up frequently, and that sort of thing by the time we get to that certification.
Okay.
Nilrim54 asks, how many languages is the game printed in? I believe it's English, Spanish, Italian, French, and German. So 5.
I believe so. I believe it's 5. Pretty sure it's 5. And we would like to be in the point where we can support all of those languages. I'm not telling you that's going to happen overnight, but you know, as a general thing, as a general rule, any language that the game is printed in, we would like to support. Although my understanding is premiere events will be aren't premiere. Isn't there a requirement to have a mastery of English at higher level premiere events?
I don't think, not for players. I don't think so.
No.
But one of the ideas is the official language of the game is English, and so interpretation of the rules, interpretation of the cards comes down to the English wording, not other languages.
Okay, that's what I was after. Yeah, that's what I was after. Yeah, and so you know, English needs to be where we start, but I very much want to support those other languages, and you know, and this game is doing really, really well. It is reasonable to think that number of languages might increase, and when that happens, we would like to be able to support it. We're not there yet. Give us some time.
Speaking of, is Cascade Games going to look to bring on more folks to help run the judge program, or is the current staff enough for the foreseeable future?
The answers are no and no today. No, this is not enough people to do things. No, we you know, with any business, you're subject to limitations, right? And so I would like to have, in a perfect world, I'd like to have 3 or 4 more people helping. In a perfect world, there would be they would be staggered globally, so there would be someone awake at all hours to answer any kind of rule question for a Discord. I I mean, I've got my dreams, right? I want an app for everybody that has a number of features that I probably shouldn't get into. So nobody's like, you promised. But I want to support 5 languages. I'd like to do customer service in language for all 5 of those languages. I would like to have a very robust team. Um, I don't have the budget for that today. I hope as time goes on, we come up with clever ways to increase our revenue. And then as we do that, hopefully we can add on more features and more awesome. How'd I do? Is that good?
Yeah,
That enough?
that's
That's
a good
enough data?
answer. Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right, next question coming up. Will higher level judges be consulted upon or brought into any conversations with Fantasy Flight Games? Basically, curious to know if or how judges can become even more involved in the program.
Today, your answer is that you get to talk to Jonah, and Jonah compiles what you say and presents it in a ranked list of what we think the priorities are. Over the long term, I suspect there will be much more activity. Okay. But today, think of Jonah as your gateway, and he will be your voice for you. So just let him know what if there are changes you want to see, talk to Jonah.
Yeah, long term, I know that many members of the team over at Fantasy Flight are really excited to talk with people, go to large events, get that feedback directly. I don't know if there's going to be any sort of formal system or any sort of council or anything like that. That is for down the line.
Right. Right.
Nilrim54 asks in the chat, is there a realm of possibility where an English judge would rule an answer through a translator for a Galactic Championship level event? Short answer for that is yes. This is something that I've done before in other games where I've been in a position of authority as a head judge. I'm the one who's conducting an investigation, or am the person who understands the mechanics being asked here, and we grab somebody who is able to speak fluently in the language to act as a translator. I know that one of the goals for the higher level events, the international events, is to have judges who are fluent in the game's languages. But it is possible that a ruling does come through translation. Let's see. Gentle Giant asks, is there a plan to have judges run projects like mentoring, conferences, etc.?
We don't have a plan to have conferences right now. I really, that was one of the things I liked about doing a Magic program, and to a large degree as a conferences. There are all kinds of issues about quality control. There are issues about quality control, which frankly, I don't think we did a good enough job on. And so that one's hard. And then on projects in general, I know that judges love to be able to contribute. This one is super, super complicated. And I think the way to just address it is to say 2 things. One, my stance is always, if you're working for the betterment of a for-profit company, you should be paid. Okay. So that's one, and that's anytime anybody asks you to do something, right? If you're deciding you want it to happen, but the company doesn't ask for it, then it's complicated. But I don't know. I've seen so much disharmony and upset feelings about people trying to pitch in and then either not having their work recognized or not being compensated the way they wanted. And I'm reluctant to go down that road right now. conferences are like, if there was a groundswell and people really convinced me that conferences needed to happen, maybe. Um, Projects are way more problematic. Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
answer. Do you want to nuance that in any way, Jonah?
Um, I think for like if you want to see something, do it. Like there before Cascade Games had this contract with Fantasy Flight Games, people in the greater Star Wars Unlimited community were creating projects and doing things. And so if there's something that you want to see, you can do something. If you want to talk to people about rules, if you want to create something that helps other people answer rules questions better, that's like we can't stop you. We probably can't ask you to do it due to the reasons Tim just mentioned, but
Yeah, it's complicated, right? I mean, overall, I know people love their hobbies, and judging is more than just a hobby, right? It's employment. It's for some people, it's global travel. For some people, I mean, it's so many things. But I feel most comfortable when I'm volunteering for charities. Okay, when there's a community but nobody asked you to do it, so it's not technically employment. I don't know. I would recommend holding off for now. Let's give this community a chance to develop more. Let's let a little bit of time go on, and but if I can tell you, I see good reasons to have conferences, but but if you want conferences to happen, talk to Jonah about it, and specifically talk to Jonah about how we would manage it so that we could ensure that there were high quality conferences. Because I don't want to have a situation where there's even a perception that conferences are a way to farm resources. Notice I didn't say foils. I have not promised anybody any kind of foil, but um, that's I don't want to have even an appearance of that. And so how do we have if we were going to have foils, excuse me, if we were going to have conferences at some point in the future, how would we do that so that we made sure that it was valuable for everybody?
yeah.
And that's hard, and it's particularly hard if you're trying to do it live.
Yeah.
So, so that's my 2 cents on that.
Alrighty. I'm gonna ask Chad if you have any last questions. As Tim, I'm gonna ask you the last one we have prepared already,
Okay.
which is, what are our long-term plans?
Gosh, I think
Yeah.
we've touched on a bunch of it, but the when I think of long term, you know, I mean, Jonah's cranking out tests at a pretty and training material at a really rapid rate. But I think Fantasy Flight has said, um, as stated publicly, that we would like to get up to level 5. So that means training materials. That means training materials and testing, and some kind of and testing processes. Also, somebody else talked about what are we going to have to do for maintenance. All of all of that. That's a ton of work, and I just said we're going to do our best to support that in 5 languages. Okay, that's a lot. Um, there there needs to be there has to be more things going on as well. I have every intention of trying to come out with some, how do I say this without an I would like to have fun things that judges enjoy having, and we'll see what happens there. So the main thing to focus on, okay, actually, way better website. Okay,
Yeah.
that's just going to happen. It's just going to be a matter of time. I want to get an app at some point, so that, because let's face it, I'm old and I use my laptop primarily, but most of the people who are watching this are smartphone first people, right? So let so so I want to have a website. I want to have an app. I want to have training, testing, and training materials, and I want to have all of that in multiple languages. And that I would consider a big chunk of work. And then we've got extra stuff that's coming that I can't announce yet.
Awesome. Um,
That's my 2 cents. Did I miss anything important?
um, I don't know. I have a lot of dreams. I have ideas of all sorts of content that we can create for the judge community, beyond just lessons and tests. I want to have articles. I want to have discussion forums so that people can really hone their craft and come together as a community. Um,
I want to teach TOs.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know when or how, right? This is just wild speculation, but I I mean, I'm not a judge, right? I've run a lot of events. I've run literally thousands of events. But what I know is how to organize, market, run tournaments, leagues, conventions, etc. I'd like to find a way to share that information. I'm I hope this program gives me an opportunity to. It may or may not, but we'll see.
yeah. All right, we got a couple more questions.
Lots of original art too. That's what I really
Yeah.
want.
Mad Dog Max TV asks, "Is there a schedule for the big events, or is it all still being worked on?" We don't have any information on that. Um,
Let's say it's in process.
um, Raster MTG asks, "Will there be a list of Fantasy Flight Games affiliated TOs that prospective judges can work with for their recommendations?" Um,
Let me try this one.
yeah,
We are working on a process. We are working on a process right now. It is not it, unfortunately it's a process to get our process defined. We have we have some cool technology ideas of how to make this happen. Stay tuned. I hope we will be able to implement the streamlined super cool high tech way of doing it. And because right now, like, if we figure there's 2,000 judges, but I have every expectation that there's going to be 10,000 plus judges. Now, I know a lot of them will actually be players who are just trying to get better at the rules, players who are trying to get a different perspective. Like, it's this knowledge should be spread as widely as possible, right? If the process of doing that, and I can imagine a world where there's 20,000 people, if Jonah has to go check the email and make sure that every judge is an actual judge and there's 20,000 of you, that's going to break him alone. And although it's kind of fun to think about how to break Jonah, we can't do that. So hopefully we get a cool technology.
yeah. Something else that Mad Dog Max is suggesting or asking for is judge only tournaments. Having something, even something small like a sealed event or a draft at these meetups, I think would be a great way, particularly towards the end of the day, that sort of thing. And I think that that's plausible. It just might take some time to get logistics set up for that sort of thing.
I would call that nearly certain to have happen.
Yeah.
I mean, even so, there's
Not necessarily major tournaments, but just small
oh
things.
no, just fun to play, hang out, and play together.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the first two meetups. So we'll probably do one with PAX West, and it's likely going to be in either a coffee shop, or we're going to either meet in a coffee shop or a hotel lobby or something like that. Whether or not they want us to play a game, I don't know, right? But sometimes they're cool. And but over time, as we have more time to plan these things, hopefully we'll have a dedicated room. I'm trying really hard to make sure that it not be a room that you have to have a hotel badge or a convention badge to access, so that people who aren't working the convention can come join. So, but yeah, I can't imagine spontaneous games aren't going to break out. And frankly, I'm super interested in drafting right now. So, you
Yeah.
know, I want to play with you.
Huh. Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to add before we do our wrap up?
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah.
When we were talking about this before the game launched, I had all these scenarios in mind. One of which is, what if we launch and we only have a couple hundred judge people who want to be judges around the world, right? Which, I mean, that could have happened, right? It's clear that's not what's happening now, but this community is this community is really neat, and so thank you for participating in it. And I also want you to know, if there's something you feel like you need to talk about, you know, if there's, I'm always open to getting an email. I'm pretty busy, so I don't have a lot of time for talking, but you can always shoot email to me. It's just Tim at Cascade Games, and Jonah's going to try, and we're going to if you have suggestions for organized play, let's channel it through Jonah. But if there's something else, really anything else, you can reach out to me, and I'll route it however is appropriate.
Yeah. I just want to say again to the community, thank you so much for joining us in this great adventure, not just the stream.
Yeah.
We're really excited about this. And one of the things that we want to continue to do is uphold our standard of flexibility and accountability and transparency. We like talking with you. We want to hear your feedback. If you ever feel like I'm not listening to your feedback, please message Tim and let him know that your point of contact is not doing his job. It's important that you feel like we are listening, because we're trying our best out here. And remaining transparent, I think, is one of the ways that we can be very successful in the long term. There's one last question that I want to get to, which is from Artie the Doggo. And it's, what's it like to work for an awesome boss? Targeted at me. And it's great. Tim has been absolutely fantastic. I've had a blast working for him ever since I started working with him several years ago.
So I'm gonna just deflect all of that.
Yeah, of course you are.
Sit here blushing, but it's weird talking and seeing yourself at the same time. I'm not like on board with this, but what I need to do is I'm trying to be a no bullshit person, and so I need to walk a line and acknowledge that I'm walking this line. Okay, there are a million things that I would like to talk to you about. Okay. Many of them, like Jonah's talking about transparency. Well, I don't want to BS you. Okay. I can't talk about a ton of things yet.
Yeah.
And so I will be transparent where I can. I won't be transparent in some cases. I will try to do everything I can from I don't know, an ethical and good spirited point of view. But I can't promise transparency. What I can tell you is that I will do my best to be a voice for the players and judges with Fantasy Flight, and I will work for the best interests of the judges as I can. And I am very, very open to feedback. I am very open to listening. I can't promise, just because you tell me something doesn't mean I can make it happen, but I can try.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I can do.
If we can tell you, we'll tell you. If we can't tell you, we'll try and let you know. And if we can't tell you, we can't tell you, well, our hands will sometimes be tied. And on the point about feedback, this is pulling something from my World of Warcraft days, but one of the devs said, if we just shipped everybody 100 gold, if we gave everybody something, some people would complain. We're never going to be able to please, with a community this large, we're never going to be able to please everybody. Us not following your feedback doesn't mean we didn't hear it and didn't consider it. It just means that for now, that's not the direction we're going in.
And that doesn't mean you're not right, too.
Right.
I mean, let's face it.
There are so many good ideas, and I'm like, we can't do that. I love that idea, but we cannot do that.
Well, sometimes it's a good idea, and we can't execute.
Yep.
Sometimes it's a good idea, and for whatever reason, I or you have a blind spot,
Yep.
right? I mean, because we're human. And then sometimes, you know, sometimes you'll have bad ideas as a community, and we'll try and execute them, and it won't work, right? So, it's going to be a journey, and hopefully everybody understands we've signed up for a journey together. But hopefully it's going to be fun. That's my big hope.
Yeah. Awesome.
With lots of cool art. Lots
Yes.
and lots of cool art. That's what I want.
We
Okay.
like the Star Wars aesthetic. All right. Thank you folks so much. And we'll see you later.